It's about moving the needle. We believe that trust is really the first needle that leader has to move, and how they build that trust. And that's what we really guide them on, is establishing that trust, making sure that they listen to their employees, don't have all the answers yet, and let them know that. Let them know they're going to need that.
Hello, and welcome to Electrifying Growth, a podcast brought to you by HealthSearch Partners. I'm Chris Sugden, managing partner here at Edison and your host. There are moments in a person or company's journey that are undeniably electric. The spark or sparks, if you will, that propel you or your company to new heights. With Electrifying Growth, we're here to have in-depth, real conversations with great leaders who have been there and done it before. Edison has been investing in high-growth technology companies for more than 35 years, and I have been here at Edison doing this investing piece for more than 20 years. We've led over 225 investments. We understand that it takes great leaders and visionaries to build market leaders. We are your support system, a CEO and management's entourage, if you will. Let's introduce this episode's guest. Hi, Chris Sugden here with another episode of Electrifying Growth. I'm excited today to have two guests join me to really talk about successes and failures, if you will, but mostly successes in search and recruiting and some of the trends that are in that space today. But as importantly, as a successful search goes, the concept of earned authority is something we talk a bit about. So the two guests I have today, Neill Marshall, who is board chair and co-founder of HealthSearch Partners, with more than 30 years experience and over 600 senior level placements to his name, as well as his colleague, Kurt Mosley, who's the associations practice leader at HealthSearch Partners. He's a nationally recognized speaker and healthcare workforce expert who's advised hundreds of state hospital associations, medical societies, and nonprofits on leadership and strategy. Together, they've built what they call the 90-Day Series, which is a framework drawn from interviewing hospital and health system leaders across the country, what actually happens in a new executive's first 3 months on the job. They talked about earning authority twice, once when the board hires the CEO or the CEO hires the executive, and the second time when the employees or team, if you will, that the CEO is working with and for actually gets the authority and has the respect and trust of the organization. Today, we're going to get into all of it. The windows that matter more than most leaders realize, what the best ones do differently, and the real stories of success and failure in the search business. Neill Marshall and Kurt Mosley from HealthSearch Partners. Thanks for joining me today on Electrifying Growth.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Appreciate it.
Well, I of course, the listeners already heard a little bit of an introduction to what HealthSearch does and what we're talking about today, but I always like to think it's better to hear it right from your own mouths, as they say. So maybe, Neill, I'll start with you as board chair of HealthSearch. Just talk a little bit about your business, if you will, and then I'll have you each give a little bit more of your background, kind of how you landed in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having us. So yeah, I'm the chairman of HealthSearch Partners. We're an executive search firm. We specialize in hospitals and health system executives. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. And over the years, we've also evolved into this earned authority the first 90 days, because what we've kind of discovered is getting the right person for the right opportunity at the right time is not what we found. Is that's not the end. The end is making sure that they're successful, right? Yeah. And so our focus is not only in helping them find the right person, right opportunity, right time, but also helping that person be successful, especially in the first 90 days.
I love it. I mean, and you said 30 years, so that's effectively a full career. My guess is you didn't start out your life thinking this would be the business you're in. How did you land here?
I had absolutely no idea, Chris. I didn't know what executive search was. I answered a 2-line advertisement in a thing, wait for it, called a classified advertisement.
We did ourselves.
In 1991, 2 lines. And Chris, it spoke to me. I have no idea why, but it spoke to me. And I, mailed an application and a resume and started in physician search in 1990.
Well, the thing I like about that is when younger people do ask me, how did you get in your business, your career? It's generally not this plan that you have when you're coming out of undergrad. And there's a great example. Kurt, how about yourself? How about you in terms of both what you do at HealthSearch? I know it's associations leader, but also how you got here, what you did before.
Sure. Well, my role is the association practice leader for HealthSearch Partner. And what that means is I work with our state hospital associations where very fortunate, Chris, to have 5 state hospital associations endorse our product to the work we do and the success we have. And I maintain those relationships. I'm also a national speaker for our company and speak on all kinds of different topics. I got into healthcare 36 years ago, same company that Neill started at, although we split parts for about 25 years. We weren't associated, but it was in physician staffing. And I'll never forget, I think in the 3rd month we were there, we were all excited because we came into the office. They told us on our phones we were going to have voicemail. This was 1990. So again, aging myself. And then during those years, I really developed more into our national speaker is a former company called Layman Healthcare, and spoke on several topics: poverty, its effect on healthcare, doctor burnout. Doctors are from Mars, administrators are from Venus, the whole clash between the two. So those are topics I spoke on for the last 30 years and sort of got indoctrinated. I had to learn healthcare before I could speak on it. So that's really kind of where I came out. And then I played baseball in college. I spent a little time in retail, and then I ended up in the search arena for 35 years in healthcare.
That's great. Well, the one thing that speaks to any executive in our audience, we've all used services like yours. And I think your comment earlier, Neill, relative to it's one thing to, land a candidate. It's another thing to have that candidate be successful. So we can all appreciate that. And we've all had searches that frankly thought we were going to be successful, and they didn't always turn out that way. So I think going right into starting there and talking a little bit about, it seems to be a hot topic, an important thing for you, all the way to the point where you guys have your own podcast and you've coined the term. I think it's not you coined it, but it's out there, but the podcast is called Earned Authority. So we just jump right into what that means as you think about it, and certainly what it means as it relates to a successful doctor search in your context, but it would apply to a CEO search or a CFO search or a chief marketing officer search in our context. But that's for either of you, but maybe you want to tag team first. What does earned authority mean? And 2, how do you think about that as it relates to a successful, landing point and success in the job?
Yeah. So authority really is granted twice to a CEO. First is the day one when the board grants them authority, hires them, and makes them the CEO. But the second time is when the employees grant them the authority. And that's the earned authority. And that's what we're talking about with earned authority. And the reality is you have to have both. But the harder part is that earned authority. I'll never forget one of my favorite CEOs. We placed him. Everything was perfect. And then within 90 days, the wheels came off. And what we discovered is that the employees, he was focusing on one thing and the employees were focusing on another. And the wheels fell off and it was a disaster. And that's when we started kind of getting into really focusing on this, because there's nothing worse than having somebody that you absolutely feel like that they're the right person, right place, right time, and the wheels come off.
I think most importantly, Chris, that first 90 days, we really encourage our leaders to focus on things like they should listen first, build trust, earn credibility before driving major change. And it's all about making sure that the audio matches the visual. Your behavior is important, and your new employees are looking to that. They don't really care at the start what you say. They look at your behavior, and you have to be consistent with that behavior.
So obviously you have one client, the health system, the hospital paying you, but in many ways the candidate is also your client, because if they're not successful, it reflects on you all. How are you conveying this concept to both sides of earned authority? And let's start with you're the doctor first, the candidate landing in the job. How are you helping them be sure they're looking for this early signs of it? They're getting pushed back. In your context, the body is rejecting the organ, you might say.
Well, do it a bunch of ways, but first in just talking about it early on, right? And talking about, because one of the things that we did, the way that this really, really started, Chris, was that Kurt and I were interviewing a guy about something else. And he ran a huge 22 hospital system out in West Texas, $7 billion in revenue. I mean, it was a major place. And we were talking to him. He said, well, when I took the job, Mama stayed home to sell the house and move in, get the kids ready. And I moved into the hospital. And we're like, yeah. Richard, everybody works hard their first 90 days. He said, no, Neill, I moved into the hospital. And I lived there for 90 days. Yeah, most big hospitals have like dorm residents. He moved in. And he told us stories about that. And I'm going to be honest, I've interviewed 10,000 hospital executives. And I had never heard anything like that.
He's truly
And
the
so-
one in 10,000.
Right. I mean, and so I thought, well, maybe I'm missing something. So we started doing some research and we started coming up with other types. His is still my favorite, but we came up with a bunch of people that did, I think we interviewed 40 people. We've come up with 15 or 18 different articles about different tactics that they use in the first 90 days and you had used in the first 90 days. And so we supply that to these people and start talking about first 90 days and how we want to work with them. And before they even show up, let's talk about, let's be real intentional about how you're going to show up and what are the things that you're going to do and how they do it, and tell them stories about people who have done interesting and unique things.
And Chris, one of the themes that we discuss in that first 90 days are leaders don't have to move everything in that first 90 days. They need to move the right things. And as you often say, I think in your podcast, it's about moving the needle. We believe that trust is really the first needle that leader has to move, and how they build that trust. And that's what we really guide them on, is establishing that trust, making sure that they listen to their employees, don't have all the answers yet, and let them know they're going to need that. So that's really the coaching, I guess we would do. And it's not necessarily we're coaching them, but we're just giving them some friendly advice to help them succeed. Because if they succeed, we succeed.
So flipping to the other side of the coin, the hiring organization, the board's hiring a CEO of a hospital or chief administrator, depending on, what they're calling themselves, if you will, or that title. The search has been successful in terms of finding, we got our guy or gal. How are you helping that board monitor the candidate? Because I think that's the battle often is, I see in our companies, we've landed somebody and we just assume they have their own playbook for what to do. And in fact, most of them do have a playbook, but it may not be the right playbook. So how do you work with your, I'm sure, again, slightly different industry, but we're in healthcare IT as well. But everyone can learn about how, when you landed a candidate, what's the best chance of helping them be successful? We all want that. Give us a few pointers.
Yeah. So the first thing is we're going to start talking about this. It's called the shootout. But when we go in and talk to the board about what makes us different, we're going to talk about the first 90 days. And we're going to talk about the fact that most boards want to see action, but we're going to caution against that. Let's focus on the right action. Let's focus on, even before they show up, you've given us 10 things that you want the CEO to do. Now let's take that list and really dig down into it and figure out what are the 3 or 4 things that the board can truly agree on that they'd like this person to do. And then let's temper it. Let's step back. Listen, we need this person to develop trust with the organization. If they're running a mile down the road and nobody's following, guess what? They haven't been able to do anything. And really working with them to figure that out and temper their expectations. Look, don't expect this person to come in and have all the answers. They need to figure out what reality is, and they need to figure out what the culture is and all of those things. And let's just temper our expectations.
There is no silver bullet, generally speaking. If someone's being replaced, often it means something's going wrong. Sometimes it's a retirement or some other, change in leader at the top. But Kurt, do you want to add to that?
No, I was going to say, we talked about it earlier with John Wooden's quote, the famous NCAA, Hall of Famer basketball coach. He said, "Be quick, but don't hurry." And that's what we really talked to the board about, and saying what Neill said, to tag onto that, what their expectations are. Act quickly to learn. They're going to be learning quickly, but they're going to be moving deliberately to change. Don't expect all that in the first 90 days. And caution their tone. And we talk about symbolic acts, and we'll probably talk about them further today, but maybe 1 or 2 things that they can move that needle in the first 90 days. That's a win-win for everybody. But at the same time, don't expect that first 90 days to be earth-shaking. And most important, we caution the board to make sure that new candidate understands the culture, because culture is the multiplier. People say, what are you talking about that? Well, it's a 10 times factor. I like to use it. You could do 10 positive things that first 90 days, misread that culture, and those will all be negated.
Well, it is an interesting fact when you think about, everyone does want to see results. We're making this big hire and let's go. And to your point about the Wooden quote is a good one, but even more importantly is the one where the candidate thinks they need to get, to your point, earn the mark on their belt, right? Show that I was worth it. et cetera. To how successful have you been to make sure the CEO, the guys and gals you're landing, because I know that not just CEOs, chief HR officers, chief nursing officers, et cetera, that you're hiring, give a hit rate for that number that actually does listen to your advice of don't go searching out these really fast wins because they're probably, I use the term, it's low calorie kind of food versus high protein, if you will. So tell me about the listening and what you've seen work and make sure candidates understand the pitfalls.
I think that one great story we had is the CEO that was brought in the first week with the board. They said, we need to do a strategic plan. He said, well, I have to learn everything. And they said, well, we really need to get on it. And then week 2, they had another, I think it was a follow-up email and said, how's the strategic plan coming? Then week 3, there was sort of just checking back with us. And then week 4, but during that time, this CEO listened to what we had to say, and he was doing rounds. He rounded all the shifts. He ate in the cafeteria with the frontline staff. He said, he asked one simple question: what's going to get in the way of us being successful? And late at night, he was at a nursing station, and the nurse manager came up to him and said, are you the new CEO? And he said, yes, I am. And she was going to offer some advice. He said, sure, I'd love to hear it. He said, I heard you're working on a new strategic plan. And he goes, well, yes, that's what our priorities. And she said, we don't need another strategic plan. We need working IV pumps. So he corrected that in one day, got everything fixed. So overnight, that symbolic act showed not only that his employees, that he listened to them, but showed the board that their priorities were a little misplaced and they needed to take care of their patients, which is their patient base and their business.
Yeah, I think that really does resonate. We see it all the time. You're upgrading a VP of sales or chief revenue officer, and the first move or two is fire a couple people, create a new sales deck. And meanwhile, you haven't gone out with some of your top salespeople and met with some customers and the product people in the company and spent a little time understanding, is the product market fit there, if you will, in the context of a technology company. So it does resonate quite a bit. The symbolic leadership actions you talk about, you sort of reference one here with, we don't need another plan. We need this small thing can get a win. Describe those specifically, but also maybe a little bit more generically as well, relative to outside the healthcare world.
Yeah, symbolic act is something you do that, well, the reality is that things that you do resonate and ripple through an organization much bigger, much faster than a memo or a talk or whatever. And interestingly, I'm on a walk with my dog one day and I'm thinking about the first 90 days and going over it. And all of a sudden it hit me. My first job ever. This new CEO on his first day did a symbolic act and I had no idea that it was and what he did. So, and then I actually wrote an article about it. But what happened was I was an executive trainee. There were 5 of us and they had fired our CEO. So brought in a new CEO. So we're all looking out the window. He pulls into the parking lot and gets out. And these are a bunch of guys like your guy, we were all a bunch of meat eaters, right? I mean, knocking each other down to get to places. So we're watching him and he gets out in the parking lot and he walks through the parking lot and he picks up garbage. And he walks in the warehouse, throws the garbage away, never says a word, comes in, introduces himself, right? But he never says a word about the garbage. But let me tell you something. That's the last day that Grover Martin ever picked up a piece of garbage, because from then on, we all showed up 15 minutes early and we walked the parking lot. So there was never a piece of garbage for him to pick up. And what he was showing us was there's a new sheriff in town and we're not going to be C players anymore. We're going to be A players. And the first thing is our parking lot's going to look good.
Yeah. I love, this in the sports analogy, that is you don't just show up on game day or for the tournament. It's all the work you do along the way. Then the other one about character, right? It's what, you do when no one's looking. That trash story is sort of checks both those boxes for me relative to not only the character, but little things matter. Of course, trash cannot be a little thing if it's a real mess, but it may have been a little thing in the grand scheme of things.
We had another guy, CEO came in, and in healthcare today, especially in hospitals and hospital systems, he who attracts and retains employees is going to win because they can't raise their prices. There's only so much cutting you can do. So if you attract and retain, so his first day he pulls up in front of the hospital, huge hospital, and he sees executive parking. And his place is right there, right next to the hospital. And he looks out over and all of his employees are walking, hundreds of yards to get there. So he goes, okay. So he goes into his first meeting with his executive team and he kind of set them up, right? He said, what's the most important thing we need to focus on? And somebody, well, it's our employees, our employees. And he said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We no longer have executive parking. We're changing that. Executive parking is now employee of the month for each department is going to park there. We are going to park at the absolute farthest piece of the parking lot. And we are going to use that time to walk in every single morning and greet our employees. And we are going to show them that they're important and that they're the most important.
Not just tell them.
Exactly. And that resonated through the whole organization.
I love that. I think that's a great example of this kind of thing where.
But it's a symbolic act, right?
Yeah.
He was symbolizing that the employees are the most important by doing something for them.
In this case, everyone could see it versus the trash being picked up. It may have been a small group that saw him doing that. But the bottom line is you recommend this to all candidates who are landing the opportunity to go in.
Think about what's the statement that you want to make 10 years from now when they talk about you. What is it you want them to say? And then symbolize it. Do something that symbolizes
that.
We had reflects that. It's actually better. We had one CEO that I haven't talked to him, but I talked to enough of his people. He ran the biggest hospital system here in Texas or in the Dallas area. And everybody knew. So when he came into your hospital, he's walking along with you touring and he sees a light bulb out, he doesn't point it out. He doesn't scream. He doesn't yell. He says, let's go get a ladder. And he gets a ladder and he climbs up and he changes the light bulb. Once he does that a couple of times, that reverberates through the whole organization. Everybody knows. Everybody better be good when Doug Hawthorne comes into the place or he's going to stop and you're going to stop and fix it right then and there. And nobody wants to do that.
And then everyone's going to notice your place wasn't in perfect shape, right?
Exactly.
Let's flip over to coaching a little bit more. And I know in your line of work, often that coaching may be left to your clients, the hiring client, but you're coaching as well relative to these candidates. And I think one of the things, there's sort of this, how do you sniff out someone who's desperate for a job versus finding the right career opportunity? And that's a little bit of coaching as well, maybe the different kind of coaching or counseling than you might be thinking of. But I'd like to hear about both of these, the coaching of the candidate, if you will, to be successful, which you talked a little bit about, but now also the coaching, if you will, of, what do you really want? What is the real right role for you? You're kind of coaching them to look for the right jobs, if you will. Talk about both those aspects.
Yeah. Well, when I get on a phone call frankly, I don't do phone calls anymore. Everything is Zoom from the very first interaction all the way through. Right.
Yep.
Which actually, from an impact standpoint, that has had probably one of the biggest impacts for me.
Well, I've got to look people in the eye, right?
From minute one. And if their camera's not on and we're not doing camera, I'm rescheduling or they're gone because I'm only interested in that. But I ask this question of everybody, right? And that is, tell me what you're looking for. What do you want to do next? I had a guy just the other day who said, I've never had anybody ask me that like that. And I'm like, well, but what that allows me to do is you tell me what you want, and I'm going to compare it with what I've got, right? And what I see, right? And, if it doesn't fit, but then you circle back and you're telling me why you're such a great fit for this. And I'm like, well, wait a second. But that's not what you said. You said you were looking for this. That's not this.
Kurt, how about you? What do you say to that? Sort of try to identify a candidate's going to be a fit for the role you're looking for.
Can't really expand on what Neill said. That's kind of my same point, but I do talk to the candidates and say, everybody needs a coach. That's some of the first hurdles sometimes you have to get over. And it drives Neill crazy, but I'm a baseball guy, from way back. And, Shohei Ohtani is probably the best baseball player we've seen in the half a century. He still looks at the third base coach every time he gets in the plate on every pitch. And also when he's pitching, he looks at the catcher to guide him on what pitch to throw. So it's convincing somebody that they're never beneath or above having a coach help them, and just say, that these people that make $700 million a year are getting coached every day. It's throughout all sports. So I think that's one of the key things is number one is convince them to take the coaching, listen to what it has to say. If it doesn't fit, that's fine. But at least be open to somebody coaching you and trying to help you open that door. You don't have to do it all yourself.
Is that it may not be a definite hell no. If you get a kid who goes, I don't need coaching, I've got it all. I assume you try and figure out if they're a know-it-all. They don't always tell you the truth, but is that close to a knockout for you?
It's a toughie, especially early on, right? I mean, listen, the kind of folks we're interested in are the kind of folks, even if they believe it, they're not going to tell you that.
They feel like needing a coach is a weakness, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
You bring it up in your podcast, Chris, but that great book by Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yes.
There is sometimes when they say, listen, I've been a CEO for 20 years. I know it all. You don't have to tell me what I need to do. But the reality is what you've done in the past may not be successful in this job, but it's our job to coach them.
I personally can relate to this kind of messaging. Number one, on two levels. One, coaching, use Shohei Ohtani. You can use Tiger Woods as a swing coach, right? We can use, any number. I think the sports analogies really hold up because these guys are kings of the world and someone else is calling the plays on the football field. Even if Tom Brady thinks he didn't need Belichick, he needed an offensive coordinator. So I relate to the sports analogy, and no one's going to really argue that Tiger was top of his game, and yet he changed his swing coach all the time and always had someone telling him what was going on. So I relate. And I also think about it from my own perspective, which is I've made it a pretty big priority at Edison. I'm saying myself and my partners, we have a chief people officer role in our operating partner cadre, a guy named Steve Schloss. And to me, it's less about what you guys do and more about that coaching that we should be bringing in our companies because we can hire your firm to help place. But we need someone who can actually actively coach because sometimes candidates don't know what that looks like. They do think it's weakness. Boy, if I need a coach, I don't know what I'm doing. But to wind this all the way back around, I've got a company in mind where the company was on fire. It was just time to move from a founder CEO to a scaled CEO. I don't even want to say experienced CEO, but someone who's sort of seen the size. The person we hired had said all the right things, but they only had a turnaround playbook. And this is a high growth company doing really well. And the assumption by this CEO was, no, it's my playbook. Everything's turnaround. You don't need me you wouldn't hire me if it wasn't something wrong. Well, no, it's take it to the next level. So it's kind of ironic, those tells of, and this was certainly a gentleman who had plenty of experience and should have known better than to at least listen a little bit before he just implemented his turnaround playbook. So I can relate to the point.
The other thing that I'll tell, and in our business, it's a little bit different than your kind of high growth T oriented, right? But most of these folks at the executive level have really only started 5 to 8 positions in their career, right? With 5 to 10 years in between. Let me tell you something. You didn't remember what you did day one. Okay.
The world changed a lot. Right.
Exactly. Right. And so allow somebody to coach you that is interviewed 10,000 hospital executives, because I will guarantee they haven't. Right. They might have been, I can guarantee they've never interviewed 10,000 hospital executives, right? I've interviewed 10,000 and I know the ones that have done and what they did good and what they did bad.
Right. So why don't you, there's the adage, 2 ears and 1 mouth and use them in proportion.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I remember a candidate, Chris, said to me, we were getting ready to visit with the board. And I said, let's have a board prep meeting. He goes, well, do we need to? And I said, what do you know about the board? He goes, well, I've never met him. And I said, well, I spent 11 hours with him, over 3 different meetings. So should we talk? And he goes, yeah, I think we should. So again, try not to be
the answer, right?
Well, try not to be rude about it, but stating the obvious is, it's one of those things,
So I've got 2, one that'll may or may not be really in the weeds relative to AI, obviously the topic of the day, of the week, of the month, of the last year. And I'm not asking you sort of how, are you using ChatGPT or Claude? What I guess I'm wondering is, what are your clients, the hiring side, how are they thinking about AI in the hiring profile in terms of aptitude, because you are dealing with, quite frankly, generally senior level positions that theoretically they're not Luddites, but they're further away from technology than they might otherwise be. So I'm kind of wondering how that conversation is going today with boards of large corporations and reconciling that with the younger people might have the tech savvy.
Yeah. So a little compare and contrast, right? Back in 1994, when I started in the executive end, I might be talking to a CEO and his assistant comes in with an email and hands it to him and he reads it and then he tells her what he wants
Dictate
her to say, and then she responds, right? And I remember thinking, these guys, even back in those days, I was scared and I would talk to boards about, look, you need to find somebody that at least understands technology to the point, because you're going to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on an electronic medical record. And, again, way back when, some of these folks would sign deals that I remember and I'd be like, I can't believe that you bought a piece of vaporware and handcuffed your organization for $100 million on a piece of software that doesn't exist. How does this happen? Right? To today, right, where I think maybe partially because of the iPhone, nobody's a true Luddite anymore. But we're at a different level. It is so important that they're open to it, that they understand, at least, because, it's going to improve decision making. It's going to increase productivity. It's going to automate administrative tasks. But what it's not going to do is it's not going to replace trust.
I think one of the big things we caution, whether it's a candidate or a board, that along with artificial intelligence requires emotional intelligence.
That's well said. Well, I guess just to drill down a little further, what are the boards asking you to find out about the candidate? Is it just intellectual curiosity? They're curious. Is it some aptitude test? The CEO of a hospital isn't going to be doing that. So how are the boards really trying to test? To your point,
they're not as much. I think they're just accepting that there's a reasonable amount and we're going to be working on it. But I will tell you, so most large hospitals today are entered into and connected in a system. Usually it's Epic, right? That they're never going to get out of in the foreseeable future, right? Because, it's $100 million for, or 150, 200 million to switch. As a matter of fact, I talked to one guy that was in two major systems coming together, and for the half to get on the same version and everything, it's going to be $500 million.
It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's what we are seeing in the hospital systems. We actually are looking at this industry right now to the point of the EMR system of record is not being replaced, but what integrates to it in terms of AI enablement of an interaction in the electronic waiting room, the billing, et cetera, et cetera. So
patient records.
Yeah. You're definitely not going to rip out that sort of system of record, right? EMR, but you're going to be working a lot around it and with it to get faster, more efficient, et cetera.
What you're talking about with the EMRs now, I think everybody's looking at it to say, it's established itself. It's, I remember 25 years ago, somebody said, explain what a cloud is to me. I was like, okay. But they're expecting these EMR systems to really start to develop their own AI. And people are sitting back and saying, which system is going to be the best at adapting to that? Because they both have to work together. It can't be AI and an EMR together.
Right,
they have to evolve.
Right.
So the industry, I was at the ACHE meeting back in, I think, March in Houston. And I heard that from several of the CEOs we interviewed. They said, how is AI going to merge with EMR? It's a very interesting topic.
The integration, the talk to it, et cetera. So this is we talked about this before the call. I don't like to, on my podcast, give questions ahead because I want it to be a natural conversation. So we're flowing here. And this question could be not so much a stumper, but I think it's fun. Every search, I think about the column, this goes old school, back to your classified. I still read to the extent, Wall Street Journal, sometimes often on the app as well, but there's a column with that real estate agents, like something's gone bad. What is the thing that's gone bad in a search? Well, I think the same thing here with your business. Search has gone awry. The candidate that, oh my God, we thought they were X and they were Y when they went to the final interview. you both have got to have one of these war stories that are both funny, humorous, and potentially a lesson learned that someone else won't repeat. So given how long you've been doing this, I got to believe you both have something that sticks out that is the search, that, oh my God, it took a turn I wasn't expecting. So I don't know which one of you. I see, Neill, you're smirking a little bit, so you might have something in mind.
I got a couple of them. This was in the interview process, right? So a lot of times at the CEO level, we do what's called a search committee interview. And what that means is there's a search committee. You've seen them. Everybody comes, you got 4 candidates that come in and 2 hours each, and then you're done and you pick the ones that you want. And I remember a guy that he walks into the search committee interview and he said, this in Texas. He sits down and he is literally drenched in sweat. I mean, and he's pouring. And this was one of my favorite guys. I mean, he was like, I had presented him as one of 4, but I mean, I really loved this guy. And drenched with sweat and never recovered, right? Sweated through the whole thing, got up and left. Well, I called him afterwards and I'm like, John, what the hell is up? And he's thinking that he showed up late, right? That he was rushing. And he said, he had left his keys back at the hotel. He had showed up an hour early, was waiting, left his keys back at the hotel, ran back to the hotel, ran back. By the time he got back, he had run 2 miles and he was dying, right? So I always tell that story to get people to show up early and that. The other is the Disney on stage, off stage, right? We had a guy who is being toured through the hospital, and he makes some offhanded comment about basically a joke, and it reverberates and it gets back to the search committee and he's gone, right? But listen, you're on stage. As a matter of fact, we tell people, especially going into smaller communities, you're on stage when you get on the airplane, flying in. You have no idea whether the person sitting next to you is married to a board member. And then you're on stage when you go to the rental car counter, when the hotel, in breakfast beforehand. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget, I had a young person that I was training and we got out of a board meeting and we're walking through the parking lot and he starts to tell him, whoa, stop. Do not say a word. We get in the car, shut the doors. He stopped. No, do not say a word. We wait until we're out of town. And I said, all right. Now tell me.
They can't track. Neill hit it right on the head, but Chris, I always talk about the iPhone elevator. Okay. We had one where a gentleman was just casually talking about what he thought of the hospital, didn't think about it, and thought he was in a general group of people. None of them looked like they worked at the hospital, but it was somebody who was off duty, was dressed in like summer casual wear. But he was talking about the city, the town. It got right back to the board, and he was the number 1, but he didn't make it to the final round.
It's funny. We've said this a couple of times in tongue in cheek, but being around business a while, I think one of the worst parts of for the recruiting business and hiring executives or even mid-level people, the receptionist interaction is gone a lot of times because we've gotten rid of receptionists. And I'm using that term, the office manager, but those are always my favorite tells is how did you treat them? That's a real tell if you treat that person differently than you treat the people interviewing you, that search committee interviewers you used.
One last one that I'll say, because you talk about changes and all that. And way back when, if you were the CEO of an organization, a hospital, let's say, and you had something happen, something blew up, you had a physician no confidence vote, you got fired, right? Yeah. It appeared in your local paper and you went on. And a year later, nobody's heard of it. No, it's gone. It's today in healthcare. And I know it's in every industry. We have an organization called Becker's. They take all of the news stories, aggregate them, right? And we call it the Becker's bomb. You get fired somewhere, it shows up in your local paper. By the end of the day, it's in papers all over the country. Then it goes out on these Becker's newsletters. There's 10 of them a day that goes for 30 days. All of a sudden, it's so far out there and you can't get in front of it. You will never get in front of it forever. As a matter of fact, we had one guy that he interviewed for a public hospital position surreptitiously, but the local paper published the 4 finalists. Before he got home, his board knew about it.
So I'm going to ask for a conclusion of something that's in your industry, not as in hospitals, but your industry of search. And it's just a little bit of a tidbit as a parting shot for all those CEOs and executives, boards doing hiring, but first engaging firms like yours. Do you believe in make goods or not? And how should they, your face makes me go, what does that mean?
Help me.
We made the hire and the person blew out of there in 60 days or 90 days or 6 months. I'll say it this way. We're often seeing these, but not every time, from search firms. In other words, you paid our fee, but the person didn't work out. How do you guys guarantee or stand behind your work? I guess is really and it's sort of a lesson to the folks hiring recruiters out there.
So at the CEO level, we're 2 years minimum. We'll do 3 for big enough ones.
Searches until someone sticks for 2 years or more.
No, we'll do 3. We'll do a guarantee of 3 years. They have to stay 3 years, or we'll replace them for free. Yeah,
and that's why I guess so 3 years. We're going to do a second search if they don't make it past then. What about the second search?
Oh, I've never had.
Thank God. Well, that's right. That's
30
right
years, right? That's a tough one.
But the point is, 3 years for a CEO is that's table stakes for you.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
that's a great answer.
And and a little bit of maybe the behind the curtain of the industry, but frankly, we do CEO searches for free if we could.
Because the rest of it, once you hire that person, you got all the other. You may not want to say that, but
if somebody would take me up, if the organization is big enough, we'll do it all day long.
Right, because once you've landed the CEO, you know what hopefully comes next.
And Chris, during that time, we spent a lot of time so we don't have to have that replacement. And we have a lot of what I call stay interviews as opposed to exit interviews. So 30 days, 60 days, how's the community, how's your family adjusting, and keep going on those so you don't have to have that exit interview at 90 days or 6 months. So again,
the frequent check-in is so much better than the annual or semi-annual review in every industry, right?
Like once a month, not even call it that. That's what we said. We call them stay interviews, and it could be just let's have a cup of coffee. How's everybody, getting into the community? Your son's on the swim team. How's he accommodating to his new school? All that. So
let me. I said parting shot. I'm gonna ask you both for a quick one. This is the 60-second answer, but I do ask this of almost every guest. Sometimes I forget. One of my favorite questions. This is the when I was 25 question. In other words, it's not a regret. It's the if I had known then what I know now. So take yourself back to your 25-year-old self and say, again, if I had known then what I know now, not so much what I would change, but what I would have done differently or how I would have reacted to that I learned. Kurt, you want to take it first, then we'll go to Neill?
Sure. My father had a lot of great sayings, and he said, I'm going to give you words of wisdom. You're going to carry the rest of your life. So, and I think it's a little bit later in life, but if I went back to 25, he told me one quote. He said, it's hard to talk your way out of something you behaved yourself into. So he said, make sure throughout your life, people are going to remember your behavior and not what you say. And, I'm a speaker, but it's really more of, people always don't remember what I say, but they remember how I behaved when I was a speaker. So that's one thing that I wish I would have stuck to back then. Yes.
Love it. Neill?
Mine really two things. The first is, at 25, a 20-year career seems like it's long, right? And what I wish that I had known was that my career was really 50 years and maybe longer, right? And so what that means is I could move a grain of sand every day and you do it every day for 50 years and you can accomplish something. That's number one. Number two was and one of your guests brought this up. My daddy used to say, son, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I'd reject it. I said, no, Dad, it's all on me. It's about what I do. And no. It is about the relationships that you build. And and I think you said it, even today, you are continuing to build relationships. And anybody who's not interested in relationships is going to be an AI victim. But there's one thing that AI can't replace, and that's your relationships.
Yeah, that trust that you said, and not be transactional with those. And I've got a couple of kids who are entering the workforce right now, and they've seen a couple of recent moments of, boy, that network really does matter, Dad. I go,
I've got one to tell your kids. Okay. They keep telling you, I don't need the relationships because I've got YouTube, right? And you sit there and you go, you know what? Here's the deal. You can learn a lot from YouTube, but YouTube ain't ever going to get you a job. They're never going to hire you.
Yeah, there's
and the
TikTok,
relationships will.
right?
Exactly.
So get out there and make them. Well, gentlemen, Neill Marshall, Kurt Mosley, great stuff. Really appreciate it. For those who are listening to this podcast with these two gentlemen, tune into their podcast called Earned Authority. And I think you'll get a little bit of better feel. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, the idea of the employees, your team members are sort of the thing you really got to win over, not just the folks who hired you. I think that's a great way to kind of cap this off. But thank you, gentlemen. Great stuff.
Thanks, Chris.
Great to meet you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining this episode of Electrifying Growth. A special thanks to this week's guest for sharing their time and insight. For more resources, inspiration, and a look inside the Edison Partners Network, sign up for our newsletter at www.edisonpartners.com. Click on the Stay in the Know button in the top right corner of our webpage. Thank you again.